Probably wrong.
Yeah. Is it far drive?
No, it's Cincinnati, so it's
Okay, yeah. Hour and 10 minutes. That's cool. Oh yeah. Do any of you guys know the history of Labor Day? I didn't either. I had no clue where it came from. And one of the Russians asked me in my class, and I was like, I actually don't know. So I went ahead and looked it up, and it matches almost like identically with how social workers began. Um, this was a decent video. In Cincinnati, we always have like a big fireworks river fest. I don't think they had it last year because of COVID, but this year they did have it again. And really, the origins are of like the 40-hour work week and trying to make sure we don't work too much, and like the child labor laws we saw a couple weeks ago with social work. So I found this video which kind of helps.
Today for this Labor Day, but do you know the real reason on why we celebrate this federal holiday? Well, ABC News correspondent Eva Pilgrim is going to give us a little history.
It's known as the unofficial end of summer, the first Monday in September, Labor Day, an American holiday where people gather across the country for parades, picnics, and parties. But besides all the bands and burgers, what's the real history behind Labor Day? The holiday is rooted in the late 19th century, but the true founder of Labor Day has yet to be identified. Just Matthew McGuire, a secretary of the Central Labor Union, first proposed the holiday. Labor Day was born amid violence and unrest over oppressive working conditions. In the late 1800s, at the height of the Industrial Revolution, the average American worked 12-hour days and 7-day weeks.
So that's kind of why they were starting it. If you remember, Jane Addams kind of advocated for the 8-hour workday, and then you get paid overtime. Like if you want to work longer, that's fine. And then show you the rest of it because it really matches up with the origins of social work.
Often in unsafe conditions, just to make a basic living. As a result, labor unions became more vocal, organizing strikes and rallies to protest poor conditions. On September 5th, 1882, 10,000 workers took unpaid time off to march from City Hall to Union Square in New York City, holding the first Labor Day parade in U.S. history. The idea of a working man's holiday caught on across the country, and many states passed legislation recognizing it. And on June 28, 1894, President Grover Cleveland signed a law declaring the first Monday in September Labor Day. Now, over 125 years later, amid the barbecues, cookouts, and celebrations, American workers are facing drastic changes to their working conditions yet again. The pandemic has led to one of the worst U.S. recessions in history and cost millions of Americans their jobs and businesses. Over this past year, there were dramatic increases in resignations too. A record 4 million people quit their jobs in April alone. And the pandemic also migrated thousands of companies to remote work, giving some employees flexibility that had been previously unattainable. So as we celebrate this year, we are paying tribute to the millions of laborers who keep our country strong, reflecting on the new normal for so many workplaces, and reimagining what the labor force will look like in years to come. And the rest, as they say, is history.
And a big thank you to Eva Pilgrim for that history lesson.
So the pandemic kind of really caused a lot of challenges and like either layoffs or people going electronic on their jobs. Do any of you guys know folks who went electronic or digital or even layoffs like in your family or friends? Yeah. Was it also today the extra $300 ends for our unemployment? Like if you were laid off, they were giving extended like $300 every week or so for people that were in a layoff, and then they said on Labor Day that was going to end. So I forget to ask you guys, how many of y'all got the extra money last year, like the $1,400 or the $300? Okay, so you had to work and pay taxes the year before, or how did that work? And if your parents claimed you, I think your parents would get it for you too. It's nicer when you get it in your own bank account, because usually your parents are like, I'm going to take half of that because I paid for you to grow up. And we're like, thanks, Mom. So I know we've talked about some of the inflationary stuff going on. So anybody here familiar with inflation and why it's an important thing for us to look at?
Inflation's when money was there ready.
Correct, yeah. So one thing to keep in mind, the U.S. had a recession in 2009, and I know you guys were all about a lot younger then. And one way we got out of it was by printing money. Hello. And that's where some of those like magic checks come from. So it's exciting when we have that $1,400, I was excited to go spend it on wise things right away. So I thought, like solar panels, an electric car, geothermal heating and cooling, like stuff to make me less bill dependent. And a lot of us got them, and it's also supposed to boost the economy, as they'll see the economy going down and crashing. And then we have a lot of layoffs, unemployment, sometimes homelessness, and then food insecurity. So that's why as social workers, tracking that stuff is so important. A lot of us sometimes wonder, anybody see gas prices go up in their city this summer at all? A lot or a little? Or? I feel like for Labor Day it hit $3 again around us. I heard in California it's like $4 and $5 a gallon. In Europe, it's about $9 a gallon, and then I think even one country in Europe is $10 because they sell it by the liter in Europe. It's actually exactly this. Actually, in Russia, how much is a gallon of gasoline? I wonder. It's like that much gas.
I don't know. I don't know.
Right. I feel like this much, it's a quarter of a gallon, is like $2 or $3 in a lot of European countries, just like in Latin America. We subsidize fossil fuels because we have a lot of cars. So there is a bill on the horizon called it's for $3 trillion. So kind of a history of what's happened to money is we have in 2008 and 2009, we had about $1 or $2 trillion in circulation. They upped that to either $2.5 or $3.5 trillion. So like you saw your value go down, rent prices go up, sometimes bread, milk, gas, but they also try to keep gas cheap so that we have a good economy. But last year, when we had $3.5 trillion in circulation, they said this year we have $8.5 trillion in circulation all around. So again, we've seen like food prices go up, different struggles in different ways, and again, inflation is such a big thing in the life of the social workers that you want to keep track of that. You want to keep an eye on it. I forgot I also wanted to follow up with you guys after watching those videos Thursday, like the Tuskegee experiment and then the forced sterilization experiments. What do you all, I wanted to get thoughts about that. Like, how you all feeling about these? Because it leads into our paper on ethics. It's due in 10 days. Because they were all found to be unethical. And the reason they were unethical is they basically let men die of syphilis. Their wives got infected. They let the experiment go on a lot longer than it should have because they had found a cure, which was an antibiotic, and the government paid them out. The other one was they forced sterilization because they thought the IQ was too low on a certain individual. So they forced them to become sterilized. Are you guys, any thoughts, any feelings, I know it's like heavy information, but it's important to be remembered. And the reason it comes into play is I think we have to either upload our immunization or your medical or religious exemption form to MedProctor by like a week from now. Did you guys get that email?
About the vaccine, they didn't send us an email, but they just posted it on like social media.
Really? Okay, yeah.
Because today, in our dorm, we have to get testing. We have to do testing
Right.
it's from 7 to 3 today.
Okay, so it's like during your normal work day or whatever. Okay, right. So if you don't get, when I worked for hospice, they would test us 2 times a week when we were full time and 1 time a week if we were part time. Kind of sucks. They like jab that thing up your nose. Do they do it different now? Do they put it in your throat or they do it in your nose?
They'll do like the rapid first,
Right.
and then they'll do the second one. that's
Right.
about 20, and then they'll do another one just in case the other one doesn't.
Right. Yeah, so I still want you guys to know there is a full choice in that. If you do have like religious exemption, medical exemption would be like if you get bad allergies, if you would have a reaction to it, and or if you even have family members. The third exemption is like for good cause. If you have a relative, and it's HIPAA protected. So this is information that you don't have to share with everybody. You don't have to talk about it. But if you want the vaccine, that's great. I think we have to upload here like shot 1 by the 17th, shot 2 by the 14th, or you use your exemption form. And that again is you upload it at medproctor.com. So I try to let y'all know there's a full choice in it. And I know everybody has a different thought and feeling about it. And I feel like some of it is because of, like unverified tests, such as the Tuskegee or the forced sterilization. They said they were just giving her birth control. Since then, we have had ethics that have turned things around. And for social workers, our ethics come from here, the NASW Code of Ethics. That's what your next assignment is about. So you would go to the values paper to turn that one in and make sure you've got it uploaded. Here's the instructions. Essentially, you're going to look up that Code of Ethics, which I just pulled up for you. You just search NASW Code of Ethics, write a paper comparing and contrasting your personal values to the values contained in the code. And you could use the Tuskegee experiment. You could use like examples. In my morning class, some people were going to go to Google Scholar and pull articles about the NASW code. And you'll critically evaluate your own values and then thoughtfully give examples where you're compatible or where you think you'll have a hard time doing such. You'll have a hard time, with confidentiality, or maybe a hard time with any different thing that comes up. It is APA style, so if you were to cite, say you want an article, NASW Code of Ethics, you just pull it here, scholar.google.com, you search the Code of Ethics, and you can even do recent articles, so like 2017, or if you wanted to have articles in the past 2 years since COVID, 2020, you can download the article, and here's how you quote it. So there's APA, you click on the quotation marks and then quote. If you direct quote in the middle of the paper, you put their names and then the year in the middle of the paper. And this is at the end. So I know most of you guys learned MLA, right? Like in high school, didn't you get MLA? That's what I got growing up. So shifting is a pain in the butt to learn how to do it, but probably every paper you'll have in social work will be APA. In fact, they'll turn away my articles when I submit any of my articles. These have to be in APA style before I submit them. If it's not, they're like, nope, sorry, rejected. They'll like look at it and just throw it out right away. So it's a good thing to learn. And sometimes you're submitting a few every year, and they won't take anything unless if you're submitting that way. Now, I had a quick intro to the NASW Code of Ethics. And we'll try to get through these so you guys can,
Hi guys, welcome. This is going to be a very brief introduction video about the National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics, the 2017 edition. Okay, so what exactly is the Code of Ethics? The code is a guide for social workers. It outlines how a professional social worker should behave in everyday situations. When it comes to ethical problems, the code is kind of tricky because it won't tell you exactly what to do, but it will lead you in one direction or another when you take into account other factors of the ethical problem as well. So first, let's break down the format of the code. There are 4 sections: the preamble, the purpose of the code, the ethical principles, and the ethical standards. In the preamble, it talks about the social work mission and the 6 core values. If you are wanting to go into the social work profession, you should probably be familiar with what these are. So here you go. The primary mission of the social work profession is to enhance human well-being and help meet the basic human needs of all people, with particular attention to the needs and empowerment of people who are vulnerable, oppressed, and living in poverty.
So if you went into social work in the first place, this might be why you chose it. I know that not everybody here is a social work major, but you'll all have a mission statement for like what your particular profession is. It won't be a ton different than this. Like, you're serving people in almost every major that you choose in some way, shape, or form. So if it's business, if it's finance, if it's education, if it's psychology, if it's social work has a specific duty to like work with vulnerable, oppressed, and folks living in poverty. So that's why some people choose to go into social work. It could be like a spiritual background, or it could be just like something that you learned in high school through community service. So this is like the beginning. You could write about, it's still a short paper. It's only 3 to 4 pages. That would be your title page, a few pages of the content, and then references at the end. So that's the APA style of it.
After this, it talks about the 6 core values, which are service, social justice, integrity, competence, importance of human relationships, and dignity and worth of the person. So after this, it talks about the purpose of the code, which we kind of touched based on. So the 3rd section are the ethical principles. The ethical principles take into account the values that we just talked about. So for example, the value of integrity has a broad ethical principle of social workers should behave in a trustworthy manner. And then after that section comes the ethical standards. These are probably what you will be mostly talking about in your social work ethics class. It goes from 1.01 to 6.02, and it talks about the responsibility you have as a social worker to your clients, to your colleagues, to the social work profession, to broader society, in practice settings, and as professionals. It just kind of goes into depth in each category of what, as a social worker, you should and should not do, and then things you might want to watch out for. So I would encourage you all to read the Code of Ethics. I hope this video helped. Thank you guys for watching.
So the people that you serve, the NASW code will go into that and your ethical obligation to them. With clients, we mentioned dual relationships. In other words, don't have sex with your clients. And that's like a number one. We said the medical profession and lawyers get a different time frame. Social workers, when I was trained, it was for life. So you can't have a relationship in the medical profession within like 3 or 4 years after you treated somebody. You can actually marry and have kids with your clients in the medical profession, or in the legal profession, it's 5 years. And social work, because we're working with mental health and more vulnerable folks from the mental health standpoint, they've made that for life. And that's something that they do take seriously. They have other obligations to their colleagues, the profession as a whole. Like if you have a duty to report somebody who's a harm to themselves or a harm to others, you may have to make a 241 kids call if the safety of children is at harm. We have an ethical obligation to broader society, and then our practice setting and professionals. So those are several areas that the way that your paper could go, and that should cover a lot of those. Any questions on the paper stuff? Because this is also, some of you who had mentioned school social work, and this was another good example of like what social workers do. I wanted to show you all. And we'll start that hopefully without a advertisement. And there is still a huge need for school social workers, which is good to know. Some social work jobs have too many social workers at this point.
Scrapbook, today you're watching a highly requested video, The Day in the Life of a School Social Worker. If you're wondering what a school social worker is, feel free to watch my video for a quick explanation. I begin my day by taking off my rollers and making my bed. Once I'm all dressed for the day, I carve out some time to create and edit future YouTube videos for my channel. Around 7 in the morning, I make sure I grab my lunch and some coffee before I'm out the door.
As you can hear, I'm not alone. I have 2 little ones in the back seat, and we're making our way to school today. The nice thing about working for a school district is employees often get to enroll their children at the school district that they work for, and we get all student holidays and student breaks off.
I will swipe in around 7:40 in the morning, and then I settle in for the day. I try to check emails and eat breakfast before the bell. That was the bell that you heard. Once the bell rings, I kind of wait by the door, watch the hallways, chat with some staff. And once announcements start, I take that time to check my emails and open up all the databases that I'll need to be efficient throughout the day. So I have a student database, my email, and then I also open up a to-do list or a running list of phone calls I have to return, or people I have to follow up with for the day.
So announcements are done, and I can check my messages now. See that little flashing red light? It means I have more than one message. So I am writing down some important names and numbers, and that's a hoop check right there. My earrings always get in the way. I actually got a quick phone call while I was taking my messages from the front office, and in this situation, I was ahead of it. I already knew what was going on, so that's a nice feeling.
Yes, we saw each other this morning. Okay, great, thank you, ma'am. Okay, bye-bye.
And back to taking notes. Although you might have your plan for the day and your schedule, it can change on a moment's notice, and that's what happened on this day. I was called up to the front office to meet with a family that needed some very significant resources. So I bring them back to my office for confidentiality reasons and some privacy, and see where I can be of best service. We do rent a clothing closet out of our district that I facilitate, and so that's what I ended up providing for the family. And now I can get back to my regular scheduled workday, which is a visit to the alternative center. I sign out at the front office to keep accountability, and then I'm off. But before I go, I do get a phone call from an administrator.
But Ms. Terry said you had a student you needed.
And they are needing a home visit to be done as well. So this will be done on my way back from the alternative center, which we're headed right now. The alternative center is where they place students that have had major behavior issues from the middle school.
I wanted to share the office of the social worker at the alternative center. I love that our district does have a social worker there. I met with about 4 students at the center, and now I'm off to my home visit. It is in a gated community, and thanks to the FedEx man, I kind of crept in.
And be on the lookout for a video on what I take with me and how I run my home visits. That should be posted soon. I'm back on campus now. I have my Deep Focus playlist on, and I'm ready to meet with students. I will file any notes that I've taken, any follow-up, any documentation that needs to be done in my filing system over here. And once I have a good list of who I'm going to pull out, and what period, and where they're at, then I can start pulling.
So a lot of these now are electronic, so that helps. Like the notes you'll write, your calendar. It does take, just like any job nowadays, a lot of computer literacy and organizational skills. So 15 years ago when we had everything on paper only, it was definitely, I feel like it was more of a pain in the butt to keep things organized. Computer, it's a little easier. You can file things in different folders and keep up with your clients that way.
Students to give them incentives for coming to school or other behavior charts that we've been keeping. Here's a bowl of candy that I find is a great incentive for middle schoolers.
Right about lunchtime, I am off today, this rainy Friday, to meet with a colleague of mine and one of our favorite barbecue restaurants. And this little restaurant is nice, kind of hidden in a little airport that we have. So we get to watch things take off and eat very great barbecue sandwiches. And I'm on my way back to work. When I get back, I have a few more incentives to pass out, a few more students to meet with, and a lot more documentation to be filed, but that's for another day. Lights are out, and I'm ready to start my weekend now. All I have to do is just pick up my kids, and I'm ready to go.
So that can be a pretty normal day with home visits. I feel like we would have to get 4 hours of productivity, which is face-to-face time. If that's going to the home or at least checking in over the telephone, you may lead a group. You might have 32 emails, like that's definitely a lot and busy. And then in those emails will probably be 18 students that you'll see, or referrals to either a food pantry or a heat assistance place or someplace to help them pay for things. Because that lately, with the prices of everything going up, that seems to be the biggest need. With like stuff ending today, the federal assistance ending, it also seems to be getting a lot more expensive. Okay, so getting back to our conversation on inflation, there's a few things. I know I've asked you guys this before. Anybody remember what a $20 bill was 50 years ago? Maybe more like, they ended it during the Great Depression, actually. So, what's that? It was an ounce of gold, yep. So 20 bucks, ounce of gold. What about $1? Anybody remember what $1 was? Very similar to gold, almost. It close, because pennies are copper, so an ounce of silver was $1. If you ever hear of silver dollars, and they made them up until 1968 or 9. If you see those like half dollars that are JFKs, anything dated in the 60s is half silver. Anything before 1964 is 90% silver. So if you find an old quarter or half dollar or even a dime, you won't find them much, but if you go through change and see that, it's worth like 20 to 25 times the face value of it because it's silver. So one thing that shows how inflation has affected us is the inflation calculator. So this is one that I thought was interesting. If you had that silver dollar from 1913, hell, even from before, before then or up until 1963, a silver dollar is now worth probably $27.58 if it's a real silver. So that shows our inflation has gone up by 2,657%. During the Great Depression, they took us off the gold. They took away the gold and then replaced it for everybody with paper money to promise to pay. Anybody know how much an ounce of gold is today? If you guess. Sounds about right. Yeah, I always say think of like if you get a real gold necklace that's 12 karat, I guess that's half gold, or 18 karat, or I know they try to add stuff in it because otherwise you can bend it real easy, like it's soft, like the Indian bangles. But I think it today was $1,802. So if you wanted to buy, a gold $20 bill from here, it would be 1,802, and that's how much our currency's been devalued since we went off the gold standard. We went off silver. The last silver half dollar was made in 1969. And again, you still can find these, but you can tell if you held on to one of those, you would have had a 643% rise in your money cost. Like a good example of inflation. And then this was the year that Nixon announced we were going to a petrodollar instead of a gold-backed currency. And even since then, we've gone up almost 600% in money. The first crisis was when you guys were in grade school, possibly. And we've still had 27% inflation since then, which is a lot. So that means like rent, your house has gone up since then, housing, food costs, gas costs, although gas is another one that's manipulated. And these, again, are important because when vulnerable people have a hard time buying food, water, and shelter, they come to us as social workers for help. They come to us. Even since the pandemic, I bet you we've had some pretty bad. They said we had 5% in June. So yeah, we've had prices go up by 7%, and I don't know where they get all their stats, but something to consider about. It looks like energy is a big one. Food, I think food's gone up a lot more than that. Any of you guys notice that at your restaurants or even the grocery store? Like we mentioned shrinkflation, where they make a bag of chips 2 ounces down to 1 ounce, but they charge you the same amount of money for that bag of chips. Also, if they take out food and energy, which a lot of times they do, you can't see it as drastically. So I want to grab this video because it was the most recent that was good on the Federal Reserve paying close attention. Those shades are, I guess it's cool outside. So some places are getting paid more, but then you'll even see it on like Grubhub and DoorDash prices. They're freaking through the roof. So as boring as it can be, it just affects our everyday living. There was a good video we also pulled up that one dude was arguing that inflation is low, which is true for like computers, electronics, and other like household appliances. And I think mainly that's because not as many people have all the money to buy those, so they're lowering the price to get a phone within our pay zone. They want everybody to have a phone, so they try to keep that cheap. They try to keep computers cheap, even though they're still expensive. And they double in speed and size every 2 years, which is called Moore's Law. So inflation on computers is definitely cheap, but food and energy are stuff we have to use every single day. So that's what we kind of watch out for.
In 2016, I was working at the Amazon warehouse when my brother passed away, and a couple of years later, my mother passed away. After taking care of them, I knew that I really wanted to become a nurse. Amazon helped me with training and tuition. Today, I'm a medical assistant, and I'm studying to become a registered nurse. Hindi ko kayo makakalimutan.
Mohammed, we're joined by Mohammed Al-Arian, advisor to Allianz and Gramercy and the president of Queens College, Cambridge. What dictates IPO interest, do you think, Mohammed? Cheap money helps. So how will this end? What do you think? How do you think Robinhood's going to do? And if the Fed were to start tapering, and it's something you think they should probably do, will that be part of the at least slowdown in all the interest here?
Good morning, Joe. Thanks for having me. Look, Joe, what we see in the IPO market in private equity, what we see with Robinhood is part of a bigger story, which is everything in balance sheets is going up, whether it be assets or liabilities, secondary markets or primary markets, whether it be new cars or used car, everything is going up. Velocity is increasing because there's so much cash in the system. That is a function of what the Fed is doing, to connect it to your second question. So people are going to be looking very closely as to what the Fed is doing. I don't expect fireworks. I think they're going to try to telegraph so well whatever they do that nothing's going to happen very quickly. But it is all a function of not just cheap money, but ample money.
Yeah. We've been so long since we had an inflationary problem, Mohammed, that I don't know whether people understand anymore. And I want to actually talk to you about that, because you're worried that it's not going to be transitory. And we've got, politicians seem like they may have skipped this part of it when they were at college, skipped the part about inflation or economics. Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio, says the only reason Republicans are talking about inflation alarmism is because they don't want workers to make more money. And he's basically saying that all these rising costs are actually good because they're going to mean rising wages. Have you ever seen wages keep up with cost of living increases? Can it be a positive?
Sure, it could be a positive. It's what's called real wage resistance. If you haven't lived in the 70s and the 80s, you probably never heard that word. But if workers have an ability to protect themselves against higher prices, they can end up with higher real wages. They don't have that ability today. They're regaining it, but regaining it from a low base. Look, Joe, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about inflation today because, as you say, most people haven't lived through it for a long time. And certainly most traders on Wall Street haven't traded through it. So it's a relatively new phenomenon, and it's being misunderstood. I always laugh when people say, oh, it's isolated, it's transitory. Remember, it was chips. Then chips became new cars. Then new cars became used cars. And then used cars became rental cars. There is a logic to these inflation chains. They take time, and most people, unfortunately, haven't seen them, so they think everything is isolated. Actually, it's not. It's interconnected.
So who's going to come in and save us from what could be a period of at least renewed inflation concerns that we haven't seen in 30 or 40 years? Is it going to be policymakers, or is it going to be the Fed, or can we not count on anyone at this point?
So it's unlikely to be the Fed. The Fed has adopted a new framework that is backward-looking. They're no longer forecast-based, they're outcome-based. So they want inflation to persist for a while before they do something about it. So it's not going to be the Fed. It could be that companies can't get their prices to stick, but the CEOs I speak to, and I encourage you to ask that question, are all pretty confident that with demand booming, prices will stick. So I think we're looking at higher inflation. The big question for me is not whether inflation will be higher than what the Fed expects. I think it's almost a certainty it will be. It is whether the system is wired loosely enough to adjust to that. And that's what we're going to learn.
So with a lot of the layoffs that come our way from the economic turmoil, this is when we see more of the clients, see more of the, he mentioned that like it's all interconnected. So that ecological model, how do the systems affect the person? Like when there's prices going up all over, he said first we had new cars go up in price, then used cars went up. Now even rental cars, like any means of transportation or trips, if you wanted to go fly to Hawaii, how much it costs, or to visit there and rent a car. And that's what we're training you for, to be a generalist practitioner. So integrated generalist model, the basis is the issues rather than the methods. So like what are the issues affecting the clients that we work with? Sometimes we'll have simultaneous intervention at multiple system level. They could be someone who's homeless, also with food insecurity, and need to find a job or get their kids in school. So it could be 4 interventions at once. We employ a variety of models and methods to use, and also a wide range of settings. So some things to look out for in that generalist practice. So that's how we promote a just society. That's finishing up chapter 3. I know this week, if we're doing a chapter a week, we're dipping into chapter 4, which is the social service delivery system. How do we get these services to folks? Sometimes they're public social services like local and state federal laws. Sometimes you could get help from all 3 of those. Occasionally it's a part of the government. So you'll have that bureaucratic hierarchy that you have to deal with. Usually our tax dollars pay it. So has anybody seen that little 10% on the end of your check when you get paid every year? You see how much you pay in taxes? It always pissed me off when I was your age, because I'd be like, sweet, I want to make $500, and you make $400 because you got to pay like federal tax, you got to pay Social Security tax, you got to pay, what is it? Is it a bee? Is it a bed bug? So yeah, it looks like it's almost dying because it looks like it should be a flying insect, but it's on the floor. He's just doing the scoot. So none of you guys have had that paycheck come and you're like, sweet, I want to get paid, and then boom, they take out all that money. Which again is good and bad, is that funds our roads, it help make fix the potholes sometimes. This year we have more potholes than ever before because we ran out of money. They want to start taxing our eBay earnings, and like if you're a 1099 employee like DoorDash or Amazon, if you make more than $600, they'll report that. So that's how some of it's funded. And it funds these private social services, the public social services, and sometimes you'll have private social services that might be from governed by agency bylaws, might have affiliation with national organizations like VA is one, the Veterans Administration. They could have shared management. Sometimes they have a private source of income, and then different agency standards for hiring. So those are some of the things that we're going to be getting into this week in chapter 4. The key is having that foundation and a code of ethics first, like what we do as social workers, how we keep it ethical, how we make sure that something like the Tuskegee experiments doesn't happen again, or the, and I forget what they call the sterilization experiences. But that's the point of having the code and standard of ethics, is stuff like that doesn't occur. That's why we don't take separate payments from clients as social workers. Like, if they're on probation, they're like, here, I'll give you $100 to help me get off probation, or something of that nature. But that's also in the code of ethics. So when you're writing your paper, type in this and you'll get the whole code of ethics, which is below here, and you follow from there. Like, write a few pages on which one of those makes sense and vibe with you, and then which one you think could be challenging, either from the ethical principles or the ethical standards. And any questions on that paper? It's not due for like 10 days, so you got some time, but just turn it in here on D2L. Trying to push more electronic in case we have a new wave. Anybody getting COVID in the dorms that you guys have heard of? COVID? Like, are they shutting them down, or are they just doing like? Okay. Because, yeah, they're even saying if we got a vaccine, you can catch it pretty easily. Right. So, you know, again, general health and wellness, there's 3 vitamins and then 3 supplements to keep you healthy and keep your exercise on. So B, C, and D for vitamins, elderberry, colloidal silver, and chaga, the antiviral mushroom. Those all help. Trying to move more of the stuff electronic in case we do have to go into shutdown. So with that, I'm done with that part of the PowerPoint, but I'll be here for questions if you guys have any afterwards. So come on by.
Remember when I was telling you about the assignment? And you told me just
Thanks so much.
how
Yep.
to just put it in.
Right.
I
Yeah.
tried to do
Like
that.
to
and
submit
then-
it again.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it said that like